I'm going to do something I haven't done for the entire campaign. For those of y'all who have traveled with me all across the country, I'm going to tell you what I really think of Donald Trump. This man is a pathological liar. He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth in a pattern that I think is straight out of a psychology textbook. His response is to accuse everybody else of lying.
Ted Cruz just got caught saying what he really thinks about Donald Trump, and the leaked audio could blow up everything Trump's trying to build heading into the midterm elections. We're not talking about some vague criticism or mild disagreement. We're talking about nearly 10 minutes of recordings where Cruz allegedly trashes Trump's entire economic agenda, ridicules the vice president, and warns donors that Trump's policies could lead to what he called a bloodbath in November. And here's what makes this potentially devastating. This isn't Cruz speaking publicly where he might be playing to cameras. This is reportedly Cruz speaking privately to wealthy Republican donors, the people who fund campaigns and shape party strategy, the people he thought he could trust with his real opinions, which means this might be what Republican leaders actually believe about Trump when they're not performing loyalty for the base. And if this audio spreads the way it could, Trump's going to have a major problem explaining why one of his supposed greatest allies has been secretly telling donors his presidency is heading toward disaster. But before we break down how catastrophic these recordings could be for Trump's relationship with the Republican establishment, real quick, you cannot trust mainstream media to explain what this really reveals about the party's internal dynamics. That's why we built John Brown Show, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want analysis that actually explains the civil war potentially brewing inside the Republican Party, instead of just treating this as political gossip, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what Cruz said in these recordings might expose divisions that could tear the party apart before the midterms. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what sources suggest these recordings actually reveal, because this represents something that could be far more significant than one senator criticizing the president. When Ted Cruz, a guy who's positioned himself as one of Trump's most loyal defenders, is reportedly telling donors in private that Trump's tariff policies are disasters and that the administration is heading toward electoral catastrophe, that suggests the performance of loyalty we see publicly might be masking deep concerns privately.
Donald Trump is such a narcissist that Barack Obama looks at him and goes, "Dude, what's your problem?" Everything in Donald's world. And he combines being a pathological liar. And I say pathological because I actually think Donald, if you hooked him up to a lie detector test, he could say one thing in the morning, one thing at noon, and one thing in the evening, all contradictory, and he'd pass the lie detector test each time. Whatever lie he's telling at that minute, he believes it.
And if Cruz is saying these things, how many other Republican senators and representatives might be having similar conversations with their donors? How much of the public support for Trump could be performative while the real feelings are being expressed behind closed doors? These recordings might have just pulled back the curtain on what Republican leadership actually believes when they're not worried about primary challenges or Trump's Twitter attacks. Let's start with the specific content that sources say was captured in these recordings, because the details matter enormously for understanding just how damaging this could be. According to reports, the audio includes Cruz speaking with Republican donors in what he apparently thought were private settings during early and mid-2025. And the things he allegedly said about Trump's policies and leadership style are absolutely brutal. On tariffs, Cruz reportedly ridiculed Trump's entire economic approach. Sources suggest he told donors that Trump's tariff policies could lead to economic disaster, that 401k accounts might be down 30% by the midterm elections, that grocery prices could be up 10 to 20%. These aren't minor criticisms about implementation details. This is allegedly Cruz saying Trump's signature economic policy is going to devastate American families financially. Think about what that means. Cruz has publicly defended Trump's tariffs as tough negotiations and smart economic strategy. But privately, he might have been warning donors that these same policies will crater retirement accounts and spike food prices right before crucial elections. That's not just disagreement. That could be Cruz admitting he knows Trump's policies are disasters while continuing to support them publicly. And sources suggest Cruz went even further by describing a phone call with Trump about the tariffs. A call that allegedly stretched past midnight, where Cruz and other senators urged Trump to stand down. And according to what Cruz reportedly told donors, Trump responded by yelling and cursing. Cruz allegedly said Trump was in a bad mood and that he'd been in conversations where Trump was happy, but this wasn't one of them. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show, because imagine what that reveals. Cruz describing Trump as someone who responds to policy criticism by screaming and swearing at senators who are supposedly his allies. Someone who can't have rational discussions about economic policy when it contradicts what he wants to do. That's Cruz allegedly painting a picture of a president who's unstable and unable to handle disagreement, even from people on his own team. But it potentially gets worse. Sources indicate Cruz also went after Vice President Vance in these recordings, that he positioned himself as the traditional Republican against Vance's less hawkish foreign policy approach. That Cruz is reportedly already positioning himself for a 2028 primary run by drawing contrast with Vance on interventionism and free trade principles, which means Cruz might not just be criticizing Trump's current policies, he could be actively working to position himself as the alternative to Trump's chosen successor. But perhaps the most politically explosive thing Cruz allegedly said in these recordings involves his warning about what could happen in the 2026 midterm elections. Because if reports are accurate, Cruz told donors that Trump's policies could lead to what he specifically called a bloodbath in November. And the way he allegedly described it reveals he might believe Trump is setting Republicans up for catastrophic losses. According to sources, Cruz told donors that if Americans head into November with their retirement accounts down 30% and grocery prices up significantly, Republicans will face electoral disaster. He allegedly said Trump will lose the House, will lose the Senate, and will then spend the next 2 years being impeached every single week. That's not predicting a close election with uncertain outcomes. That's reportedly Cruz describing a scenario where Trump's policies create such economic pain that voters turn against Republicans decisively enough to give Democrats the power to pursue constant impeachment. Think about what that warning reveals. Cruz apparently believes Trump's economic agenda is so damaging, it could cost Republicans control of Congress entirely. And more significantly, Cruz might have acknowledged to donors that losing congressional control means Trump faces nonstop impeachment proceedings, which means Cruz knows the charges exist, knows the evidence is there, knows that only Republican control of Congress is protecting Trump from accountability. And here's what makes that particularly interesting. Trump himself has said basically the same thing. Trump warned Republicans at their retreat that if they lose the midterms, he'll get impeached. So Cruz and Trump apparently agree on one thing. Losing in November means Trump faces removal proceedings. Where they might disagree is whether Trump's own policies are what's going to cause Republicans to lose. Share this video with everyone you know, because Cruz's alleged warning to donors suggests he's preparing them for potential disaster. He might be telling the people who fund Republican campaigns that they need to prepare for losing Congress because Trump's economic policies are that destructive. That's not just criticism. That could be Cruz actively undermining confidence in Trump's agenda among the donors who keep the party functioning. Now let's talk about what these recordings reveal about Cruz's character and the broader problem of Republican two-faced behavior. Because Cruz has a particularly egregious history of saying one thing publicly and another privately when it comes to Trump. And these new recordings might just be the latest example of a pattern that goes back years. Remember that Cruz once called Trump a pathological liar, a narcissist, utterly amoral, a bully who comes from weakness and insecurity. Cruz said Trump lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth, that he's cynically exploiting angry voters. These weren't private comments. Cruz said all of this publicly during the 2016 campaign, after Trump attacked Cruz's wife and suggested his father was involved in JFK assassination. But then Cruz endorsed Trump, campaigned for him, became one of his most visible defenders in the Senate. Cruz transformed from Trump's harshest critic into what some called his groveling cheerleader. And publicly, Cruz has maintained that loyalty throughout Trump's second term, positioning himself as the president's greatest ally in the Senate. Except now these recordings suggest that privately, Cruz might still hold many of the same negative views he expressed publicly in 2016. That the loyalty is performance. That behind closed doors with donors, Cruz is reportedly back to criticizing Trump's judgment, his policies, his temperament, his likely impact on Republican electoral prospects. Think about what that says about Cruz's integrity. If the recordings are accurate, he's telling Trump one thing to his face while telling donors the opposite behind his back. He's defending policies publicly that he allegedly believes will lead to disaster privately. He's maintaining a facade of loyalty while potentially positioning himself to benefit when Trump's policies fail exactly as Cruz reportedly predicted they would. But Cruz isn't unique in this two-faced approach. Sources suggest many Republicans behave exactly the same way. They perform loyalty publicly because they're terrified of Trump's base and his ability to destroy them in primaries. But privately, they express deep concerns about his policies, his judgment, his impact on the party's long-term viability. And these Cruz recordings might expose that dynamic in ways that could be deeply damaging. Because if one of Trump's supposedly greatest allies is secretly trashing him to donors, how many others are doing the same thing? How many Republican senators are having similar conversations with their big contributors? How many are warning about electoral disaster while publicly claiming everything is fine? The leaked audio could potentially encourage others to speak more openly. If Cruz's private comments become public and he survives without devastating consequences, other Republicans might feel emboldened to express their own concerns. You could see more leaks, more recordings, more evidence of Republican leaders saying privately that Trump's presidency is a disaster while publicly maintaining loyalty. And that kind of exposure could be devastating for party unity heading into crucial midterm elections. Voters need to believe their representatives actually support the agenda they're defending. Donors need to trust that the warnings they're hearing in private match the public messaging. When those things diverge as dramatically as these Cruz recordings suggest, it undermines confidence in everything the party says. Share this with everyone because there's also the question of who leaked these recordings and why. Sources indicate a Republican provided them, which means someone within Cruz's own party wanted this information public. That suggests internal warfare, someone trying to damage Cruz's credibility or expose Republican hypocrisy or create chaos within the party before midterms. Now let's talk about what Cruz allegedly said about Vice President Vance, because that aspect of the recordings could reveal Cruz's longer-term strategy and create additional problems for Trump's succession planning. Reports suggest Cruz used these donor meetings to draw contrasts between himself and Vance on foreign policy and economic philosophy. That Cruz positioned himself as the traditional Republican hawk and free trader while characterizing Vance as less interventionist. Think about what that means. Cruz is reportedly already running for 2028, already working to position himself as the alternative to Vance for Republicans who might want to return to more conventional conservative policies. And Cruz is allegedly doing this while Trump is still in office and Vance is still his vice president. That's not just looking ahead to future campaigns. That could be Cruz actively working to undermine Vance's standing with Republican donors and power brokers. And the way Cruz allegedly drew these contrasts might be particularly damaging for party unity. By positioning himself as the foreign policy hawk, Cruz could be signaling to traditional Republican defense contractors and interventionist donors that Vance doesn't represent their interests, that the party needs to move back toward more aggressive foreign policy after Trump leaves office. That creates factions and divisions within the coalition Trump is trying to maintain. Make sure you're subscribed because there's also the question of how Trump and Vance respond to these recordings. Trump historically doesn't handle betrayal well, even from people who've been loyal. If he believes Cruz has been secretly undermining him with donors while claiming to be his greatest ally, Trump might turn on Cruz publicly, might start attacking him on social media, might encourage primary challenges. But Cruz represents Texas, a state Trump needs in his coalition. Cruz has a significant following among the party's conservative base. Going to war with Cruz could create problems Trump doesn't need heading into midterms, where Republicans might already be vulnerable. So Trump faces a difficult calculation about whether to respond aggressively or try to contain the damage. But perhaps the most significant aspect of these recordings is what they might reveal about Republican donor confidence in Trump's agenda. Because Cruz wasn't allegedly expressing these concerns to random people. He was reportedly warning the major contributors who fund Republican campaigns and causes, the people whose financial support the party absolutely needs to compete in expensive modern elections. And if Cruz is telling these donors that Trump's policies will lead to crashed retirement accounts and electoral bloodbaths that could fundamentally undermine their willingness to continue funding Trump-aligned candidates. Donors invest in campaigns because they believe in the candidates or expect returns on investment through favorable policies. When a prominent senator is allegedly warning them that the president's agenda will lead to disaster, that creates serious questions about whether continued investment makes sense. Sources suggest major Republican donors are already concerned about Trump's unpredictability and the political risks of associating with him. These Cruz recordings could reinforce those concerns by providing specific predictions of economic and electoral disaster from someone inside the party leadership. Donors might start hedging their bets, funding more traditional Republicans who aren't tied to Trump's specific policies, looking for alternatives to invest in rather than continuing to fund Trump's agenda. And that funding question could be crucial for midterm competitiveness. Democrats are reportedly raising enormous amounts of money by campaigning against Trump. If Republican donors start pulling back because senators like Cruz are warning them disaster is coming, Republicans could find themselves significantly outspent in competitive races. And in close elections, funding advantages often determine outcomes. Think about what happens if more recordings like this emerge. If additional Republican leaders are caught warning donors privately about problems they won't acknowledge publicly, the cumulative effect could be devastating for party fundraising and candidate recruitment. Who wants to run as a Republican if party leaders are privately predicting electoral bloodbaths? So how has Cruz responded to these leaked recordings? According to reports, his spokesperson issued a statement claiming Cruz is Trump's greatest ally in the Senate and battles every day to advance the president's agenda. The statement allegedly characterized the recordings as attempts at sowing division that are pathetic and boring. But notably, the statement reportedly didn't deny the accuracy of the recordings or claim Cruz was misrepresented. That's significant because when politicians face leaked audio, they typically either claim it's fake, argue it's taken out of context, or acknowledge and defend what they said. Cruz's response apparently did none of those things, just deflected to claims about loyalty without addressing whether he actually said what the recordings capture. That could suggest the audio is accurate and Cruz's team knows denying it would be pointless. And the claim that Cruz is Trump's greatest ally rings somewhat hollow when recordings allegedly show him trashing Trump's policies to donors and warning about electoral disaster. You can't simultaneously be someone's greatest ally and the person warning wealthy contributors that his agenda will lead to crashed retirement accounts and lost elections. Those positions are fundamentally contradictory. Think about what Cruz's best move might be going forward. He could try to explain the recordings by claiming he was playing devil's advocate with donors or testing their commitment. Could argue he was expressing concerns constructively to help Trump avoid disasters rather than undermining him. Could claim his warnings came from a place of loyalty rather than betrayal. But any of those explanations requires acknowledging the recordings are real and what he said is accurate. And once Cruz admits he's been privately warning about disasters while publicly claiming everything is fine, the two-faced problem becomes undeniable. He's trapped between defending his honesty to donors and maintaining his claims of loyalty to Trump. So here's what these leaked recordings might represent. A devastating exposure of Republican two-faced behavior where loyalty is performance and real opinions get expressed only behind closed doors with donors. A senator who called Trump a pathological liar in 2016, then became his cheerleader, now allegedly trashing him again in private. Warnings that Trump's policies will crash retirement accounts and cause electoral bloodbaths. Predictions that losing the midterms means nonstop impeachment proceedings. And active positioning for 2028 campaigns even while Trump's term continues. The political fallout could be enormous. Trump faces questions about whether his supposed allies actually believe in his agenda or are just going through motions. Republicans face exposure of the gap between public loyalty and private concerns. Donors hear warnings from party leadership that might undermine their willingness to continue funding Trump-aligned candidates. And voters see evidence that what they're being told publicly might not match what party elites actually believe. Cruz tried to contain the damage with statements about loyalty and dismissing the recordings as division attempts. But the audio exists. The warnings he allegedly gave donors are documented. And the contrast between his private comments and public positions might be impossible to explain away. This could become a defining moment that exposes the hollow nature of Republican unity heading into the most important midterm elections in decades. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because we're covering every aspect of this story as it develops. Every new revelation from the recordings, every response from Trump and Republican leadership, every way this undermines party unity and donor confidence before crucial elections. Cruz might have just handed Democrats the ammunition they need to argue that even Trump's closest allies know his presidency is heading toward disaster. And we're tracking every development as the full impact becomes clear. Stay tuned.